Hello. Look, I'm a little bit more in frame. But anyway, today's video was one that I was going to do next week, but I noticed that the video I put out today on imposter syndrome, it was really one that I made a couple weeks ago. And I didn't put it in because I wasn't sure about it because I'm not a psychologist. But I do have a lot of psychology. But anyway, the point is when it popped in to my list, it actually um, said 2 weeks ago. So some of you might be seeing it, and if you haven't seen it, you go look at it. Some of you are asking for encouragement on your writing, and you want to know, how to improve your writing and how to get that book out there, or get the courage to go ahead and write it and put it out there. Well, the imposter syndrome video is kind of about that. It's about getting started, get going, defeating that inner doubt you have, and going ahead and just persevering and putting the book out anyway. There are going to be people that aren't going to like the book. There's going to be rabid fans that love it and can't get enough of it. You're going to get the whole gamut. It's just part. It's the nature of the beast. It's part of writing. Just like YouTube channels or anything else, you're going to get the people who have nothing better to do than to tear other people down. Sometimes that ends up being people who tried to do it themselves and failed, and so they don't want anybody else to succeed either. So they go and they troll and they say, "Oh, this is a terrible book," or "This is a terrible thing," and they give you 1 star or whatever. It happens. It really hurts you if you publish on somewhere like KDP, Amazon, direct publishing, and you're self-publishing, and you go in there and you have 2 reviews, and one of them is a 1 star. Then it kind of hurts your sales and hurts your book. But some people will do that just to torpedo you, or you might be on a bestseller list or on a list where your book is rising up, and sometimes there are a couple of unscrupulous authors out there that will think, okay, well, I need to torpedo this person that's coming up because they're about to surpass my book and knock my book down the list some. So I'm going to go on and review their book and give them a 1 star or whatever. And the problem with Amazon is Amazon doesn't take off reviews, especially if they consider them to be legit. It's almost impossible to prove that someone is being malicious. Goodreads is really bad about it. Goodreads is owned by Amazon. It's a list where people go and they talk about books they've read and stuff. So there's a review system there too. It's slightly different than the Amazon review system, but it's all over the place. And it's you can have old covers and stuff, and they'll put them on Goodreads, and then Goodreads will never remove them. So you've got multiple. If you go to mine, Cleave Bourbon, and you look at my Goodreads, I've got all sorts of covers and all sorts of versions of books that aren't even available anymore. It's just ridiculous. I don't know why they do that. But anyway, so if you want to have some encouragement about writing and you're looking forward to that, then go check out the imposter syndrome video I just released. It's going to say 2 weeks ago, but it's a big yellow thumbnail, I think. Anyway, check it out. So I'm going to go ahead and do a short video today about filter words. And I'm going to elaborate a little bit more because most of the time when I look at AuthorTube videos of other authors giving advice, they tend to give filter words, but they don't tell why they're filter words. Filter words are words that you should take out of your manuscript that you shouldn't be using. But another thing that they don't actually show is they don't actually show phrases or other things that you should also remove. Occasionally they do. I'm not saying they all don't. Some of them do. I'm just saying my video here, I'm going to show you things that I've encountered grading essays from students, and that I've encountered from people who are inspiring writers and so forth. So without further ado, let me go to the share screen, to my whiteboard, and I'll give you a couple of examples. The first example that I wanted to talk about here is when you don't need a preposition. It's called a redundant preposition. So in Texas, you're going to hear a lot of, hey, John, where's your mom at? Where's your mom and dad at? You're going to hear that a lot. And because we say that, but you could just as easily say, hey, John, where's your mom? Or where's your mom and dad? You don't need the at. It's called a redundant preposition. Some relative pronouns like that. For example, this is the coffee that I like to buy. I see this a lot when I'm editing people's stuff. And I should, just to make this copacetic, let me put the T in there, the capital T. So this is the coffee that I like to buy. I see this a lot in sentences. You can remove that. most of the time I call it that disease. When I'm helping my friends with their kids who are in college, they're writing essays. They send me their essays and say, "Hey, can you help us with this?" I'm saying, "Sure." I see this one a lot, and I say, "Oh, they're suffering from that syndrome. You can remove that." Whoops, not that one. You can remove that, and it's actually a better sentence. You can say, "This is the coffee I like to buy." You don't say, "This is the coffee that I like to buy." You don't have to put it in there. Is it wrong? No, not necessarily, but it does mark you as an amateur writer if you leave it in. Whereas you could take it out. The other thing I see a lot of that you should remove from your writing is things like she gestured to the table with her hand. Okay, so this is another one. She gestured to the table with her hand. Now, grammatically, sentence-wise, it is a sentence, and it's a fine sentence. It's perfectly okay. However, it's kind of ridiculous because what else would she be gesturing with? She gestured to the table with her hand. Is she holding a stick? She gestured to the table with a stick. Or the only thing you can get away with this one is like if say it's a wedding planner or something, and they're setting up a bunch of tables, and she says, she pointed to the, where are we going to sit these people? She gestured to the table with the tip of her pen or something like that. That lets you know that it's tip of the pen. But otherwise, of course, it's going to be her hand. She gestured with her eyes. She gestured with her feet. It's probably going to be her hand. So you can just say she gestured at the table. I said to the table, but you can probably say at. She gestured at the table, or she gestured to the table. Either one, I think, would work fine. Another thing is when people walk into a room, he walked. Walked is not a very good verb, by the way. We probably should use a more colorful verb. He stumbled. We're going to say he's drunk or something. He stumbled into the room and sat hard down on the sofa. Let's just put sofa. Okay. Again, this sentence is grammatically correct. Fine. He stumbled into the room and sat hard down on the sofa. Probably take out the hard. He just put "set down." I was going to say he's kind of drunk, but it doesn't flow very well with that in there. So I'd probably remove that anyway. He stumbled into the room and sat down on the sofa. All right. Is he going to set up on the sofa? Is he going to sit around the sofa? I mean, do we really need to know that he sat down? Right? Most people, when they go in and they sit on a sofa, they sit down. That usually works, so you can remove that and just say he stumbled into the room and sat on the sofa. You don't have to say sit down, right? That's kind of, well, down's a preposition anyway, but that's a kind of redundant because on is also a preposition. So you wouldn't need set down on. The only time you need two prepositions is like if you release the balloons up into the air. Up and into are both prepositions, but you kind of got to tell where you're releasing the balloon because it's not necessarily, it depends on what's in the balloon. If it's helium, then you're going to release the balloon up into the air. But if it's filled with something heavier than air, then you release the balloon and it dropped like a rock or something. It just depends on how you're describing it. Or it might not necessarily be released up into, it might be something else. But anyway, you can put two prepositions together. That's okay. It's just in situations like this where it's understood that when people sit, they sit down, you can remove it. Here's another one. This one's a good one because I see this a lot in amateur writing. The sun rose in the east as he sat on the porch, or something like that. I'm just making stuff up. So the sun rose in the east. Of course it rose in the east. That's where the sun rises. Everybody knows that, right? Sun doesn't rise in the west. It sits in the west. So similarly, it works the same way. The sun set in the west. Well, of course it set in the west, where unless we're on an alien planet or you're actually trying to make it different, like you're writing science fiction and your planet's axis is different, and your sun rises in the north and sets in the south or something, then of course, if you're talking about this planet, our sun does actually rise in the east and it sets in the west. So you don't need to say that. You can say the sun was rising as he sat on the porch or something like that. You don't need to say in the east. Get rid of this prepositional phrase. Of course, if you do that, you're going to change the verb. You're going to have to reconjugate the sun. You're going to use a helping verb. Was rising. The sun was rising as he sat on the porch. And then people are going to just understand that you mean the east. If you're talking about this planet, that is. If you are a science fiction writer, obviously, you might have a different, there might be a different sunrise or something. And that's just up to you if you want to do it something like that. So these are some things to look for in your writing, in your beginning writing, things to cut out. Similarly, he stood up from the table. Well, yes, when you stand up. So you can just say he stood from the table. You don't have to say he stood up. And things like that. Just those are words you can eliminate that are actual, not filter words. Those are okay words. It's just you don't need them. Your writing would flow a whole lot better if you just eliminate them. If you can take out a word and your sentence makes sense, or it sounds better, or it flows better, take it out. Get rid of it. All right. The other thing that I wanted to talk about real quick while I have the whiteboard up is these are filter words: was and were. Was and were. There's something called subjunctive mood. Subjunctive mood says that if it's a flight of fancy, in other words, a wish or an if, you use the word were. So I wish I were a rich man. I wish I were a fireman. Okay, you use were because wish, or if I were a rich man. So if you use wish or if, it's going to be were because it's wishful thinking. If you're stating a fact, you use was. I was a fireman. I was rich before I lost all my money. Okay, so again, statement of fact, you use was, subjunctive mood. If it's a statement of wishful thinking, you use were. So there's your help with was and were. Also, was and were can end up making your writing passive and active. You hear that a lot. The things that you hear from the author tube a lot is don't use passive voice, was and were, and also show, don't tell, show, don't tell, show, don't tell. Okay, I'm going to tell you, they say that, and I'm not saying, I'm not counting, I'm not calling out anyone because it is actual good advice. You should watch that. However, you cannot eliminate all was and were. Your writing will look stupid, and you can't, just be blunt. And you can't always show and not tell, because some things that you could tell, like the person getting up and eating breakfast and getting ready for the day, nobody cares. You could just tell that. You can say she got up, had her breakfast, and headed out the door, because that's not really helping the story along if you described everything she ate and the way she cooked it, and the way it smelled, and you put all the descriptions in, and then you go out to the day when the action happens. All right, it's extremely boring. People know breakfast and know how to cook breakfast probably. That's something you could just tell. You don't have to go day by day, blow by blow. So there are some things that you can tell. And the same thing with was and were. There are some times when you're going to use was and were, those as filter words. I mean, not filter words. You're going to use them. One of the things that always irritated me when I was a new writer before I got my degrees and started writing my books and put out novels, is people would say, don't do this. And then I would look at like Stephen King or J.K. Rowling or somebody, and I would say, but they do it all through their book. And they, J.K. Rowling's a billionaire. Oh, well, don't look at her writing. Her writing's not very good. She's not that great of a writer. And I'm thinking, okay, great writer or not, she's a billionaire. So she did something right. And I tell my students when we're talking about writing, one of the things I do tell my students is the story is the most important thing in your book and in your writing. If your story is bad, then it doesn't matter how good of a writer you are. If the story is boring and bad, then no one ever reads a book and says, oh, you need to read this book. It has the best grammar I've ever seen. Most people don't recommend books based on grammar or how it's put together. They give recommendations on books on how this is a great story. I mean, it made me cry, it made me feel, whatever. So you can always fix grammar. You can always go back and do what I just showed you here with the sentences. You can always take things out and add things in. But story is probably the most important part, because once you've got the story down, it's really hard to go back in and add chapters and take chapters. You can do it, and people do. But, grammar is something you can fix pretty easy. Story and plot holes are a little bit more difficult, but we'll get to that at some later video. All right, so let me stop this real quick. and we will talk about, I'm sorry, I look at the camera. We'll talk about these filter words. So let me bring my filter word list. Now I'm making this list and I kind of copied and pasted over places and I'm adding to it. I plan to make this a really pretty nice list. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that here in just a moment. So some of this I just got from different places, different authors' advices on filter words, and it's stuff that I've used. Anyway, I'm trying to make an actual list that I'm going to put in my bullet journal. Now, let me move this stuff around a little bit. Now, this is my bullet journal. Whoops, let me get it in here. Got a lot of tabs and everything. You could do all of this. I even got my signature down. And let's see, and here's January. I have I made a calendar. I used my ruler and I, figured it out and made the calendars, and I have calendars for the whole year in the bullet journal. And I'm working on the bullet journal. Now, one thing you may say about the bullet journal is you could do all that on like a tablet. You could have, the notes on a tablet and it's fine. Well, yeah, you can, and that's great. But doing a bullet journal is kind of like scrapbooking. It's kind of fun. And not only is it fun, you can get the stuff at like Kinko's, Office Depot, Office Max, places like that. You get cheap. I think this one costs like $10. And then I got all the little, stuff to go with it. There's these little bitty tiny Post-its that you can use in it and stuff. And then of course the little flags and stuff that you can buy. You can get those anywhere. Office supplies are sold. But anyway, the reason why a bullet journal is fun is because it is kind of like scrapbooking, and you can map out your whole year and all of your books in it and keep everything straight. You can put passwords in it and things like that for different author stuff that you have. But the other thing I thought is I can put this away, and then I can shuffle off my mortal coil and move, and my grandkids and their kids, I think, can still see what I was doing and what I wrote, and they'll see my own handwriting and my plans and all that kind of stuff that I was trying to do. And on a tablet, that tablet's probably gonna be long gone, 100 years after I'm gone, it'll probably be long gone. But the book will probably still be here. At least I hope. That's the hope of it. The reason why I got that idea is because of other author tubes that I watch. They have bullet journals, and I thought, why don't you just put it on a tablet? And then I realized, hey, this is more permanent than a tablet. And also, I'm a big fan of horror, especially Gothic horror. My specialty in grad school, over here, grad school right there, was 18th and 19th century Gothic literature. So I saw a documentary with Bram Stoker's great-grandson, and he actually had Bram Stoker's notes, and it showed where he marked out Count Vampire and wrote in Dracula, and it had his notes on what the vampire weaknesses and strengths and stuff. And he has that because Bram Stoker wrote down physically in a book, or in a notes, wrote them down physically. If he had left them in some sort of tablet, which they didn't have them back in 1897, but if he had written down in a tablet, we wouldn't see that stuff. So not that I'm ever going to be really super famous or anything, but hey, my kids may like my books, and my grandkids and their grandkids and stuff. So I'm doing it for a couple of reasons. The biggest reason, to be honest, is it's really fun. It's really fun to put one together. If you like scrapbooking, then putting together a bullet journal is cool. You can just look up bullet journal and ideas for bullet journals. I put my promotions for books in here. I put all my plans and dates when I plan to release books and things like that in it. You can also put your YouTube videos in it. Okay, so back to the filter words. I'm going to finalize this list. I've been gathering up these filter words. I'm going to finalize this list, and I'm going to put it in my bullet journal where I can look at it whenever I start editing my books. Because believe it or not, when I write, and you don't catch everything anyway, even when you do edit, is I want to go through and have something I can look at, so I can find and replace in my word processor to find some of these. All right, assumed. Okay, there's a couple of these verbs in here, like seemed. If you look down here at seemed, I hate that word, seemed. And the reason why is because I was in a creative writing class, and one of my professors said, if it seems like it's a duck, it's a duck. So don't ever put seems. You can write seems if you're in dialogue and there's a character and the character's like, he seems to be upset, and they're kind of being sarcastic and stuff. That's fine. You can do it that way. I'm just saying, if you're writing like a description, you're doing that showing, not telling, and you're writing a description like, he seemed to be walking down the street. Well, if he seemed to be walking down the street, he is walking down the street. So that's why you eliminate that. There's a lot better verbs you can use. These are called vague verbs too, by the way. Assumed is a vague verb. I assumed, and you can, a lot of these times, a lot of these words, a lot of times you might have a weakness in yourself. My weakness is the word smiled. All my characters are always smiling excessively, like to the point where, it's like creepy. So I have to go in and take out a lot of smiling and change them up a little bit. All my characters talk to each other and they smile. That's one of the things I've fought with a while. I know another author, an author too, hers is shrug. Her characters shrug all the time. There's another one that I follow, and her personal filter word problem is nod. Her characters walk around nodding all the time. So, you'll find that if you write in length, like long books, you'll find that you'll run into words that you yourself will overuse, and you'll have to go in and fix them. But don't do it while you're writing. That's one of the big mistakes that new writers make, is they try to edit and make everything perfect the first time because they don't want to edit, or they don't want to send it off to an editor. The problem with that is, when you do that, you have two processes in your brain, your creative side and your analytical side, and they're both opposite. So when you're trying to do that, you're working against yourself. So you should just get the story out and write it, and then you go back and edit. That's one of the reasons why you do that, is because if you're doing both at the same time, you'll never finish, because you're just working against yourself, making writing twice as hard as it should be. Don't do that. Write the story, put in all the warts and all, go back and edit it later. Okay, you can use find and replace very easily on almost every word processor I could think of, Word, Scrivener, and you can type in decided, and you can see all the decideds, and you can decide if you want to leave it in or take it out. If you can take it out or make it better by using a different verb, then that's what you're doing. That's what you're actually trying to do. You're just trying to make it better. Could is always sometimes a helping verb. I could have done better, that kind of thing. So a lot of these words you just have to look at your sentence and see if it flows better, if you could say it a different way. If it doesn't, leave it in. It's fine. There isn't any filter word police out there that's going to come to your house and say, when you were editing your novel, you left all the coulds in. You should have taken them out. No, you don't have to do that. There's nobody going to do that. All right. These words like looked is a weak verb too. Looked is a linking verb as well as an action verb. If your subject is doing the looking, then it's an action verb. The student looked out the window. If your subject is not doing the action, like, ooh, that hamburger looked delicious. Okay, your hamburger is not looking at you. If your hamburger is looking at you, something is incredibly wrong, and you probably shouldn't eat that hamburger. But it's the subject of the sentence. That hamburger looks delicious. That's a linking verb. You're linking the hamburger with being delicious. So when you say it that way, looked is fine as a linking verb. If all of your characters are looking all the time and they're not peering or gazing or anything else that might be a stronger verb, then you should adjust it somewhat. All right. Same thing with a lot of the stuff, like sounded works the same way as looking. And thought is one of those things where he thought, she thought, I thought, it happens. It's a repetition word. Watched, that's another one. So see, look, see, some of these are lapping over, like see and look. There's here again. No, realize. That's one of my problem words too, is realize. He realized he was walking down the street, of course, or I didn't realize this was going to happen, or something along those lines. Realize is one of my things that I have to reel in a little bit. There's decide again. See, I've got stuff that are overlapping. Notice and noticed, yeah, overlapping. Notice is one of those as well. Oh, and your character, I feel you should do this. I feel you should do that. He felt this. He felt that. That's a big one as well, And when I see these filter words, the thing that comes to mind, these are all overlapping. One of the things that comes to mind is if you take all those words out, what are you supposed to put in there? What are you supposed to do? that's a problem. You are supposed to put something in there that's a little bit more strong, a little stronger words, instead of looking, or, you know, he craned his neck to see the balloon flying over the United States, or something like that. You know, you can say it that way. They use the word see, or you don't have to use see. You can say he craned his neck and saw the balloon up ahead, or something, or he craned his neck to peer into the sky, or, you know, there's things you can do. There's ways you can do it. Then but you don't want to overdo those either. So it's a fine line. But I don't know, filter words. I don't have a problem with filter words as much as I have a problem with the first thing I showed you today, which is the phrases like sit down, stand up, things like that. For the simple fact that those are, you know, universal. Like, people do sit down. They don't sit up. Well, they sit up if they're in bed or something. They'll sit up, but you know what I mean. People don't stand down. They do stand down, but not when they're actually physically standing. You know, the stand down would be like stand down, like get back, stand down. You know, but we don't say stand down in relation to somebody standing, you know, by a table. He stood by the table instead of he stood up by the table, or something along those lines. Anyway, I'm being repetition. I'm being repetitive. I'm having a hard time saying my words today. All right. So hopefully this will help you out a little bit with your work. What I will probably try to do is I'm going to continue to make this list, and I'll probably make a list. Well, not probably. See, probably is another one. I think probably is will make my words softer. So I end up saying probably a lot, when what I mean is I'm going to make a list, and then eventually I'm going to put it in this YouTube channel where you can actually download it or something, and you can look at a comprehensive list. But I don't want to just give you a list of filter words and phrases to take out. I want to give you the list and a little bit of explanation of why. Because just taking out words at random, if we took out all the looked, or we took out all the saw or seemed, and we took them all out, you just eliminated them all out, you know, with find and replace, you're going to lose something in your writing. It's not going to be good. That's not what we mean. And so I think a lot of times when authors say, hey, on author tubes, or they're trying to give you advice and say, hey, take these words out, they're filter words, people get the misunderstanding that we want you to remove all of them, and that's not the case. If you do, your writing is gonna suffer. So I want to give an explanation of why, or better yet, an explanation of when you should and when you shouldn't do it. So look for that in the future. I'm still working on it right now, on my busy schedule. Eventually I'll put one out, and I'll try to make myself a little note so that I can just continue to work on it. Anyway, if there's anything else that you're having trouble with in your writing or in your book that you want to talk about, then just put it down in the comments and I will get to it. Some people were putting down things about encouragement, and so I put a video on imposter syndrome out. That's when I went ahead and published it, because it talks about encouragement, you know, how to overcome that inner demon so that you can go actually go ahead and write. I will do some more actual grammar classes on the YouTube channel. If they don't seem to be as popular, but if you still want those, let me know in the comments if you want me to go over like verbs and things like that, how they work. And they get pretty involved. I can do that as well. And the other thing is I'm still actively writing books. So I've got a couple in pre-order right now, and so I will start doing cover reveals and start talking about creating those books as well in future videos. So there's a lot of things to look forward to, and a lot of things that are good that are going to be coming up. So anyway, if you have anything that's comment, like, subscribe, whatever, and I will see you next Friday. Thank you very much. Oh, maybe I should stop sharing. Okay, thank you very much.